Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are going to be learning together Torah Kuf Yud Beis and Likkutei Moharan Chelik Aleph, which is the Osios of Baki, because it's going to be a Torah about being a Baki in Ratzah and a Baki in Shov, as Rabbi Nachman describes in the sixth teaching about the need to process both ends of the spiritual spectrum and see both of them as fundamentally significant in the process of connecting to God. So Rabbi Nachman opens up this Torah with our parsha this week with regards to the command to Noach to create the Teivah for the sake of protection in the flood. Pasuk says, "Tzohar ta'asa leteva," that you should make a window for the Teivah, ve'el amma tachalena, and that there should be a space of an amma on top of it, me'lamala. Upesach hateva betzida tasim tachtayim shnayim v'shlishim tasel, and the entrance to the Teva should be next to this Tzohar Ta'asel Teva. Perish Rashi, what is this Tzohar? What is this window? What is this source of illumination that Noach is commanded to affix in the Teva, and that he actually does affix? So Yesh Omrim Even Tov, V'yesh Omrim Chalon. There are those who say that it was a beautiful diamond, and there are those who say that it was a window. So the question ultimately becomes, what was the source of the illumination within the Teva that Noach found himself in? The Torah commands him to make a Tzohar. But the question that Rashi is bringing out is that there are those who say that this Tzohar, the source of light, was the illumination of a precious stone, and there are those who say that it was the illumination that came from without towards within in the secret of a window that illuminates the inside. Hine Yadua, Zok the Heilige Rebbe, it's known, Ki Saviv Rishaim Yisalechun, that when it comes to understanding negativity and evil in this world, when it comes to understanding the sitra achra, or the concealment that we encounter, we have to understand that very often it operates in the sense of surrounding, of circling something and operating on the edges of something, not necessarily occupying the main focus point of consciousness, but they surround and they're always eavesdropping on the main point of consciousness and always ready to pounce from the outside of the circle into the inside of the circle. That's why Rishaim, it's always referred to as Saviv Rishaim Yisalechun, that the Rishaim encircle the individual, slowly but surely breaking down the defense systems to the point that they can lunge forward. Ki hasitra achra misaveves hakadusha. The reason that the nature of the klipa is to surround something is because the very quality of the sitra achra is that it surrounds the innermost point of kedusha. It's like an external shell that remains separate from the center point, and it's relegated to the surrounding periphery. And because the source of negativity stands at the periphery, so too the way that negativity entices us is by way of encroaching upon the field of vision that we encounter, intimations from a distance that are not necessarily occupying my mind at the present moment, but nevertheless through their encircling like a predator, so they will eventually find their way in. Ki et zeh lumat zeh asa. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created the world in an equal balance between positivity and negativity, light and darkness, kedusha and its opposite. Ubeprat misha kvar nimshach acharei haveros. This is especially true for someone who already finds themselves susceptible to transgression and falling into those territories of struggle. It's all the more so that the klipa and concealment is going to surround that person, and it's going to be waiting to pounce at the moment that a person's defenses are down. Visham mekomo. That's the place where a person who, God forbid, is nimshach achara sitra achra to the surrounding periphery of things, sham makomo. If a person finds their place there, chas v'shalom, heim mesavivim osol mikol tzad. Literally, like predators, like vultures, the sitra achra begins to encircle the individual so that if it can't get me with point A and I fight back against point A, it will then get me with point B. And if it can't be point B, it'll be C ad infinitum, because it's surrounding me from all angles and there's seemingly no way for me to escape it, especially somebody who is malumid in this encircled nature of being caught within this kind of enemy guard. Uka'asher ya'orer rucho l'shuv el Hashem. But what happens when a person awakens within themselves the desire to return back to Hashem, to break free from the destructive behaviors, to break free from the transgression into the concealment? It's very difficult at that point for a person to capitalize on the positive point of their spiritual awakening or the spiritual excitement. Why is it difficult for a person to actualize that hear her tshuva if they're already malumid or stuck in the addictive process of their transgressive behavior. The reason is because I'm surrounded, I'm encircled by the concealment. And yes, they may have given me the semblance of thought to think that maybe I'm in control because I'm not acting out or falling at this particular moment in the center of my life. But nevertheless, that was all because it was waiting in wait in the periphery, waiting to pounce at any given moment. And I was still an addict in that place. I was still stuck and conditioned within that encircling. And therefore, when it comes time for me to break free, when it comes time for me to open my mind to the vistas beyond my concealment, so I find that it's difficult to actually actualize on my spiritual desire because I'm surrounded by concealment, like the klipa that surrounds the fruit. Each person in accordance with the thing that keeps them stuck. One of the most beautiful things about the Torah of Rabbeinu and the Torah of Rabbi Nassan and the Torah of the Makor Chachma, the Nachal Never Makor Chachma, is that when it describes the transgressive tendency of the individual to remain stuck in destructive behaviors, it never specifies the specificity of the particular act, because the particular act would make it specifically about that thing. And if it's specifically about that thing, it's not about some other thing. And if it's some other thing that bothers me, then it's not really talking to me. And therefore, what Rabbi Nachman does is he maintains a certain anonymous quality to the struggle that a person is finding. But be that as it may, whatever the struggle is, whenever a person awakens and has a desire to break free from that struggle, it's very difficult because they're still surrounded by the concealment, and therefore that her tshuva doesn't have wings to fly. Sagt der Heilige Rebbe, Umachma shi'i efshar lo hoitzi dibur lifnei Elokim b'dechilu v'rechimu v'chayus kiraui. And as a result of being enclosed and being stuck by the concealment of the Sitra Achra, or at least the feeling that I'm surrounded by the Sitra Achra, where even a moment of success is not really going to be seen as success because it's going to be seen in the framework of the eventual fall that I'm convinced I'm going to have. But as a result of that, I'm not able to enunciate, I'm not able to speak, I'm not able to express my inner position towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm not able to express my tefillah, my Torah, the expiration of my spirit in the yearning desire to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because I'm mibulbal and I'm surrounded by concealment. And because I can't bring out that word with the chilu, with fear, and with rechimu and love, with the chesed and the gevura of das, or chayus, or das itself, or the vitality necessary for a person to speak strongly and confidently about their spiritual bond to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because I'm broken down and surrounded by the concealment, anything that I'm trying to convey at that moment, any positive words that I'm trying to say to capitalize on the her tshuva, to pull myself out of that concealed place, to express my most positive point of self that remains caught up in the silence and the concealment of the surrounding concealment, what do I need to do? What happens? What happens when these words are fallen? Lo yachlu livkoya hamachitzois v'amachasim hamavdilim la'alois lamala. The words are not spoken with the confidence strong enough to break free from the concealment, to break free from the self-consciousness. Those words are spoken in a way of weakness, in a way of insignificance, and therefore they can't break free and open up a pocket of air of Gan Eden for me to pull me out of that place. V'nisharim lamata, and the words remain below because they're spoken with weakness. They're spoken with a weakness of the self-fulfilling prophetic perception that I will consistently fall because I've fallen in the past. Tachas masachim, the words fall prey to concealment and they don't fly upwards to break me out of the concealment that I find myself in. Ad asher yizke v'yashuv be'emes. But the fact that those tefillos don't break free from the concealment of the transgressive pattern in my life doesn't mean that they don't do anything. It doesn't mean that they go to waste. Klal gadol beruchnius is that ein silik moichin la'olam, and that when there's a process or a presencing of kedusha, even when it dissipates afterwards or it seems to dissipate or disappear, nevertheless it still leaves an irreducible trace, and that every iteration of spiritual desire or desire towards tshuva or desire towards even the slightest gesture of spiritual growth in a person's life, even if it doesn't actualize itself into some sedimented form of spiritual growth, nevertheless, it reveals the perpetuality and the nitzchias of these spiritual engravings that we engrave, waiting for them to be elevated. So they remain below, but there comes a time where I actually do full tshuva, where I'm actually able to break free from that weakness of the self-fulfilling prophecies and those self-destructive patterns of behaviors that I find myself stuck in, and I'm able to speak my way out of it, and I'm able to say a word of emes with confidence to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I'm able to take ownership over my soul, and I cultivate words that are deserving, words that are deserving, words that are deserving of being, words that are deserving of being spoken. Hold on, Chevra. I'm sorry I lost you for a second. So when I finally open myself up and I speak words that are deserving of being spoken, when I open myself up and I speak those words that are deserving of breaking free from the concealment, from the depths of my heart with a tremendous level of excitement, the words that I speak illuminate all of the concealment, all of the blockages that have been blocking me until this point. It breaks free all of those concealing elements. And what goes upwards is all of the tfilos that have been held down until now. All of the tfilos that were not able to express themselves upwards because I didn't have the spiritual confidence to feel that I'm other than my problem, they all break free when I finally break free from that self-defeating perspective, and they ascend upwards and they break free from all of the preventions that seem to be blocking the way. But the question is, how do we merit this? How are we meritorious of this secret of developing diburim chazakim and diburim kadoshim that have the ability of breaking me out of the stupor of that self-defeating process, which keeps me contained within the encircling levels of concealment? So Zak the Heilige Rebbe. Ich yizkelazeh. What do we have to do? Ha'ikr shehakol talubo, the main principle upon which this entire process of breaking free is dependent. Hu emes leilech b'derech emes lefi madrigaso, to adapt oneself to the truth that is relatively true in accordance with the level that that person is standing at that moment. Truth is a shetach. Truth is an area. Each person has their own individual truth. And when a person aligns themselves to the truth of their circumstances, to the truth of their spiritual standing, to the truth of their emotional vulnerability, to the truth of their willingness to take ownership over themselves, that truthfulness, that alignment to the truth, to the nekuda ha'emsai, that makes a balance between the extremes of either expressivity or repression, but truth gives birth to the balancing act of Tiferes. When I walk in accordance with truth, according to my level, that's what's going to help me break free. Because in truth, the stamp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes, meaning to say, anytime a person wants to behold the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their lives or in the world, a person has to look towards the truth, because truth, something that stands, something that is essential, something that is irreducible, something that is steadfast and balanced in its expression, that doesn't bend towards any of the polarities of extremism, but rather it maintains itself in the silent, humble expressivity of the Kav HaEmtsai, of the Nekuda of Yaakov Avinu, of the Nekuda of the Tzaddik, that Nekuda of the Emes, then a person is connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if I align myself to the honesty of who I am, and I look at myself unflinchingly in this moment with eyes of radical honesty, and I say what's what, and I acknowledge what's what without the typical defense mechanisms that protect me from those realities, when I attach myself to that, Hu Yesod HaKol, it's the foundation of all things. Emes is the foundation of all things. Ki emes hu rosh toch sof. Emes is the first letter of the Aleph Beis, the second letter of the Aleph Beis, and the last letter of the Aleph Beis. Emes represents something that is true from the beginning through the process of the middle and revealed fundamentally in the end. There's no deviation. It reveals what it intended to reveal. It's something that is centered in a person's life. Attaching myself to the most stable and sturdy things within me, in the Nekud of Tzaddik, within myself, in the Tzaddik Sed Olam, and the Nekud of Tzaddiko Shel Olam, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Kevan Shuba Madrega Emes, once I attach myself to some element of truth, no matter how low it is, wherever I stand at this particular moment, if I could admit to something, if I could say a true word, if I can identify where I actually stand in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as I kavyachol nislabesh boy or Hashem Yisparach. The moment I acknowledge and I lean into a truth, and truth is so delicate, truth is so significant, truth is so serious. And again, we're not talking about collective truth in terms of the verification of data. We're talking about the radical capacity to be vulnerable in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu without levushim, in a state of hisboidedus, of nafsho masim bekapo, that I put my soul into my words and I can truly, truly say what needs to be said. I can truly get to that place that I can never get to when I express myself in that place of emes la'amisoy, and I attach myself to the baseline truth that remains in spite of all things, at that moment I become a vessel for the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kavyachol, because I become the choitem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I become the stamp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. If I attach myself to some sense of self and radical honesty and rigorous honesty within my life, at that point I attach myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's as if Kavyachol Nislabish Boy or Hashem Yisbarach Ba'atzmo. At that point, a higher power greater than myself gives me the strength to awaken from within myself and to uncover new vistas of capacity. Asher chotmo emes. The reason for that is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's stamp is emes. And so when I attach myself to the stamp, I become the stamp. Va'az ne'emar alav. And at that point, what's said about the individual who's able to say emes about themselves, and again, it's the subjective emes that each and every person holds deeply within their innermost point of their heart, with the nekuda hashayach leliba ba'es hazos me'umka deliba, between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that nekuda of emes, when a person is able to speak a nekuda of emes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then it says, Hashem oiri v'yishi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only are you my light, but you are my salvation. At that point, I'm able to pick myself out and move out of the concealment, because I can break through the surrounding concealment of the Sitra Achra. V'kevan sh'Hashem orlo, and because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is actually now illuminating that person's life, and it's light for that person in that moment, Yachol limsoa pesachim harbe letzeis mehachoshech v'hagalus shehu sagur sham. A person will uncover the reality that there are many, many openings through which I can escape this concealment that I find myself in. Again, the Torah starts off with the reality that when a person finds himself stuck in concealment, especially a concealment that is bolstered by the repetition cycle of engaging in the addictive process of the same thing over and over, to the degree that I feel that even if I'm not actively engaged, I'm still surrounded and flanked by all sides. So a person feels that they can't break free, and because a person feels that they can't break free, they don't have the strength in their words in order to break free, and it's a self-fulfilling prophetic destructive process that I don't feel I'm strong enough, and mamela I'm not strong enough, I remain stuck in that process. But when a person has a hisayrus and they're able to speak a word that breaks through the concealment, what they do is they draw down a new illumination of their higher power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within their heart, and according to the moment of radical, vulnerable honesty between myself and God in this moment, in the secret of ani v'ata, of hisboididus, of being fully present within myself, of not holding anything back. At that point, there's an illumination, and I come to realize that, wait a second, what I thought was foolproof, what I thought was completely encircling me and completely surrounding me to the degree that it was impossible to escape, in truth, there are many, many holes that I am able to escape from. And the powerlessness and the impossibility of change and the hopelessness that is induced by certain perspectives of self, all of it was not really real, and there are many, many psachim, there are many, many openings through which I can exit that darkness of my life and the exile of spirit that I found myself stuck in. Zak the Heilige Rebbe. Ki be'emes yesh sham pesachim harbe. Wherever a person finds themselves, wherever a person has fallen, even if it's a mabul of a person's life, there are always openings. The Seid Yesharim points out that the Gemara says that shloisha psachim legehenim yesh. There are 3 openings to Gehenim in the world, and the Seid Yesharim says all we have to understand is gewalt. There is a pesach from Gehenim. A person can escape. There are always openings. If I found myself there, I can also climb out. If a person believes that they have the ability to destroy, they must believe that it's the very same capacity and faith that values behaviors enough to see them as destructive, that also encourages us to find goodness and restoration through the tshuva process. And there's always openings for a person. There's never a time where there's no opening. Like Chazal have already told us, somebody who comes to defile themselves, somebody who comes to allow themselves to fall prey to the natural tendencies of the flesh and fall into the self-destructive, addictive tendencies of pleasure-seeking and destructive behaviors. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates an opening. HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows that there's an open path towards falling, because that's the natural proclivity of the self. Yesh lo psachim harbe. There's so many openings for a person. There's openings for a person, meaning to say there are openings for a person to fall into difficulty. The kevan shenimsa sham psachim, but because there are openings there that a person falls into difficulty, hayayachol letzeis, a person can also exit. If I can fall in, I can also exit. If I believe that I can break, I believe that I can fix. The same klal that makes me feel bad about my behavior should be the very same klal that reveals to me the radical capacity to fix the behavior. But in spite of the fact that I can actually escape, and I don't realize, wait a second, if I fell in here, that means I could also climb out because I came in here from somewhere. But the ksil b'choshech chelech. A person imposes a certain self-induced blindness upon the self that enables and validates the perpetual struggle and the falling into the behaviors. And a person blinds themselves from the openings that rest there because they're like a foolish person who walks around groping in the dark, not finding any opening. V'lo yira hapsachim letzeis, and a person like this is going to be incapable of even seeing the openings that are there right in front of them to help them pull themselves out of that stuckness. V'hu aser v'kasher sham. And in the person's mind, they assume that they are stuck there, completely stuck and addicted in that place, unable to move, in spite of the fact that all it takes is opening my mind with an akud of emes la'amiso and drawing a Kadosh Baruch Hu down, whose chotmo is emes, to reveal to me the lights and the openings that rest right in front of me at every moment. And a person becomes convinced that they're not going to allow me to leave. I'm never going to escape this broken place. Ad asher Hashem. All of that is until a person has a moment of vulnerable, honest conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through tefillah, through hisbodedus, where a person finally expresses to themselves what needs to be expressed, and a person finally says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu what needs to be said in order to help the person move to the next level. And then at that moment, va'azai v'Hashem orlo, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is light for that person. The diburim are meir. The diburim illuminate the darkness, and they reveal to me that, wait a second, I've been waiting down here for so long thinking that there was no escape, but the escape route has been right in front of me all along. And the illumination of that moment reveals to me, va'azai pasach devarecha ya'ir mibein psayim. A person should open up their mouth and it should illuminate the space, even though they found themselves amongst the foolish. Because by speaking about positive activities, by speaking about benefiting myself, by speaking about becoming better, mamela, I become better. The speech act is one of the most fundamental introductions to any actual state of change. Kichu imachem devarim v'shuvu el Hashem. First and foremost, one must explicate and express and verbalize and articulate to themselves, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Nekuda of Tzaddik within them, to the Nekuda of Tzaddik that rests within the Svarim HaKadoshim that a person is attaching themselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to another person, that a person has to be able to speak honestly. And when a person is able to speak honestly, it breaks free from all of the concealment. Hadiburim hameirim, the words illuminate. Hainu diburei emes, true words, true words. How many words need to be said until a true word is actually said? And sometimes the true word is the silence of the self, facing the enormous feeling that a person encounters when they're finally honest. Heim marin loy hapesach. At that moment, when a person expresses a true word, they uncover new koach within themselves, and they are shown the exit. The exit is revealed to them. Ahainu desayim, and this is the end of the pasuk that says, "Pasach picha v'ya'iru dvarecha," that you should speak, open up your mouth, and allow your words to illuminate the world. The pasuk ends mi bein pesayim, from amongst the foolish. Ki apsayim hanusina b'choshech, because the foolish who are still stuck in choshech because they feel that there's no exit and that they're surrounded and they're entirely enclosed. Lo yiru letzeis. They don't give themselves the opportunity to leave. They don't realize, they don't believe that they have the capacity of walking out of the darkness, of letting go and letting God. Yavinu v'yiru apesach letzeis me'achoshech, through honest words and vulnerable conversation between friends and with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Rabbi Nachman says that a person has to learn how to speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like one speaks to a good friend, which implies the fundamental necessity of having a good friend to speak to as well, as is Mevuar B'Tachlis in Chasidus Slanim, and the Tfar Shlomo points out that a friend is like tzitzis, that you can look at it and it can remind you all of the good things about yourself. When a person is zoiche to a good friend, as the Heilige Beis Yisrael said, that when we say that haba l'tayr Messiah, so that somebody who wants to come and purify themselves, that they send help from heaven, so the Beis Yisrael said that comes about by way of a good friend. And the Heilige Balasulam Schlusi Gan Aleinu said that really the only nekuda of bechira that a person has in this world are the friends that they choose. And Rabbi Nosson writes in Likkutei Halachos, based on the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Hayoshevet baganim chaverim and the end of Shir Hashirim, when it speaks of the friends who sit amongst one another in the gardens, listening to one another's words, so Zok the Heilige Rabbi Nosson and the Zohar, Ganim, gardens, doesn't necessarily mean a paradise or an orchard. What it rather looks like is gnus. It's a language of disgust in the broken places in my life. It's specifically there where a person has to draw from their friends. And the secret of Yehuda and his friend who came to save him or help him reduce the shame in the situation with Tamar and the Hiskalus of the light of Mashiach, who's referred to as a Chaver. And so it's speaking to friends or it's speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that reveals the opening for us to leave the darkness. Kamesha Kasav, like the Pasuk says, Le'emor la'asurim tzu, you will say to those who are enslaved, to those who are stuck, they will be told to exit. La'asher b'choshech yigalu, to those who sit in darkness, they shall be redeemed. Ach tzarech sheyeh ha'emes, emes gamur. But the emes, the truth, has to be a fundamental truth, a real truth, a full truth. Barur v'tzalul, it has to be clarified, it has to be rarefied, it has to be clear. Belishum dofi, without any defense mechanism. A person has to be fundamentally ready to give it over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely. Whatever the feeling is, whatever the emotion is, whatever the impasse feels like, a person has to be able to say, Rebbeinu Shleilam, ich kenish, I cannot do it without you. I am powerless, I cannot move forward, I don't have the power, and I need you to give me the strength to cultivate happiness, confidence, patience, whatever the midah that a person is working on, whatever behavior a person is trying to overcome. It's only with a true clarified word of emes gamur barur v'tzalul b'lisham doifi, which only comes about from a Kadosh Baruch Hu as well. Zak the Heilige Rebbe, the hamaskil hamavin, and the person who understands, what's being said. Yesh loy lehispalel kol yamav. A person can spend and should theoretically spend their entire lives davening. Sheyizke pam echad kol yemei chayev ledaber dibur echad shel emes lifnei Hashem karoi, that they should be zeicha to speak even one true, vulnerable, fully present word in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning to say we don't have to be so worried about the fact that it's very hard and that we've been trying for a long time and then it still doesn't seem to work. A person has to be mishtadel to operate within the framework of emes. Titein emes leYaakov. The implication is that Yaakov still doesn't even have emes. It's only an emes that's going to be given because only HaKadosh Baruch Hu could give emes. And we have to daven that HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the capacity to speak a true word which will be strong enough to illuminate the darkness and to break us free from the conception of being stuck within the encircling conditions of our addictions and our destructive behaviors and our low levels of low confidence and anger, etc., all of the things that hold us down. And we have to open ourselves up with the possibility of freedom. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who gives us that koyach. There are many levels to this experience. But someone who's zoichet to the level of emes la'amisa, the highest level of emes, the recognition that it's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes and Hashem Elokeichem emes, and that in relationship to the emes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything is contingent. As we saw in the previous Torah that we learned together in Torah Nun Beis Hanei or Belayla, how everything is just conditional and everything is contingent and non-essential. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is essential. That's the emes ha'amiti, as the Rambam describes. Azai Hashem Orlo. Only then, when a person taps into that radical capacity to be fully forthright with the Rebbeinu Shleilam, because there's absolutely nothing else in the Welt other than the Rebbeinu Shleilam. Azai Hashem Orlo, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals the light. Va'azai hu meir ba'atzmo, and then the person begins to illuminate themselves. The person's neshama itself illuminates the darkness. I begin to find the answers to the questions within my own self. Ki nislabish or Hashem, because like we said, when a person taps into that light of emes, they become the receptacle, so to speak, for the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to express itself down. And that's why in the heart of Hispaidus, in the heart of saying Tehillim, a person can listen to themselves and they can hear the eitzos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is whispering through the innermost point of their heart in the secret of L'cha Amar Libi Bikshu Panai. Ach misha adayin lo higi l'madrega elyon shel emes, but a person who is not yet arrived at that spitz level of emes where they're fully functioning at a place where they know that there's nothing to be ashamed of in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that there's nothing that separates them from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the innermost point of the Yiddish heart, and that anything that we've done and anything that we will do is with the koyach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, and the secret of the tshuva shekadma la'olam, and that brings refuah to the olam, and the secret that Moshe Rabbeinu understood, that no matter what happens, Klal Yisrael is always right, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that, and that's why He created the world for the sake of Nishmas Yisrael. When a person comes to that place of chizuk amiti, of the emes la'amiso, they have the hislapshus of Or Hashem kavyachol within them, and their words illuminate. Someone who hasn't reached that level, but nevertheless they've operating in a level of relative vulnerability in the face of revealing a little bit, even though not everything can be revealed, etc., even though the person is not becoming the source of illumination themselves, their neshama is not illuminating from the inside out. They haven't refined the self to the degree that it's translucent and revelatory of the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because they haven't yet arrived at that true form of emes. Nevertheless, there's two levels here. There's levels of emes where a person has reached a place of vulnerability and bittul where they truly become refined, and in that moment they can illuminate the path and see within themselves the koyach that they have to break free from whatever conditions they felt that they were stuck in. That comes with the full vulnerable abandonment of any defense mechanism and the recognition of kasher avadati avadati, Hashem, I'm going to reveal everything to you. I'm going to be myself in front of you. I'm going to say what needs to be said and continue to try and say what needs to be said in spite of the seemingly impossibility of saying what needs to be said. When a person is mispashets from the levushim and they have a true word with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they themselves become the source of illumination because they themselves become the choitim of emes. But there's gradations to emes, and a person can't always be held to the degree of revealing this strength of emes on that level where they can fully break free from everything, and there's gradations. So I'm admitting to a little bit, or I'm acknowledging the problem I have with this trait, and I'm not fully taking accountability, but I'm beginning the process of taking accountability. There's a harm reduction model of spiritual growth here. It's not all or nothing, God forbid, as we said, that small steps are fundamentally part and parcel of the very nature of the spiritual process, that each and every step doesn't lead to perfection, but rather it reveals within itself the perpetual, endless process of trying to become more perfect, because the only thing that's truly perfect is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At that moment, even within my imperfect attempt to break free, I don't necessarily become the illumination of the world itself. I don't see how I can break free. I still believe in my self-limiting beliefs, but I've refined myself to the degree where I've illuminated my darkness enough to be susceptible to real orientations towards change, to be susceptible to real possibilities of picking myself up and shifting my behavior and becoming better than I am and doing more than what I thought I could. And slowly but surely, that level of lower refinement will bring about new levels of change. Im kol zeh, says Rabbeinu, ha'emes hoyil, emes, this level of emes has done enough to give that person the ability to be illuminated by another person. They're now susceptible to receiving a suggestion. They're susceptible to receiving insight from another person to help them along the path. And even here, there's relative gradations and levels. Yavinim hamaskil ba'atzmo. Each and every person will understand their levels in accordance with their own self, as Rabbeinu said earlier with regards to the emes that we're trying to cultivate here, which is the emes that is relative to each and every person. Zak the Heilige Rebbe, v'hine yadua, it's known. Sheyesh shloisha oilamos. There are three worlds. Now, over here, he's speaking about the three worlds of separation, separated from the world of Atzilus, because in Kabbalah, and we know from Metzias, there's four worlds, there's four olamos, there's Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. But nevertheless, Atzilus is seen as a standalone entity, the Yud of Chachma Kaduma, which stands separate to a certain degree from the Nefesh, Ruach, and the Neshama of the worlds of separation. And so the worlds of separation, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, in spite of the fact that they represent three gradations of spiritual reality, nevertheless, they're grouped together in the element of worlds of separation writ large. And so that's what we're going to see here. Hine Yadua, says Rabbi Nachman, Sheyesh Shloisha Ilamos, there are three worlds in which a person can find themselves. The world of the Malachim, Oilam HaMalachim, HaGalgalim, VeHagashmi, the world of the Malachim, which is the world of Bria, the world of the celestial bodies, which is the world of Yitzira, and this world itself, which is the world of Asiya. VeHashem Yisbarach Mechaya U'Mekayim Kulam Beretzono. And it's the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's mispashet from Or Ein Sof Mamish down into the world of Atzilus, where it's Ihu, Vegarmaihu, V'chiyuhu, Chad Bahoin, in a secret of unification that is not found in a revealed way on the levels of the worlds of separation. And the Chayas and the vitality and the illumination comes through Oilam HaAtzilus down into the worlds of separation. Umisha Zoicha Emes. And somebody who is Zoicha to a light of Emes in their life, a moment of vulnerability, a moment of honesty, a moment of realizing that there's nothing to hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's nothing to hide. There's no possibility of hiding anything from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I have to bring everything to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything, all of myself, the broken, the built, the beautiful, the ugly, every part of myself. Every part of myself, as the Paitan says, that hineni borech mimcha elecha, I run from you to you. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to pull over, right? A person has to run directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that nekuda of emes. And at that place, Hashem orlo, kavyachol, a person becomes the illumination itself, and a person is capable of breaking free the concealment that they found themselves in. And at that point, hu makayim ha'olam. At that point, the person draws vitality down into the Metzias. They are now the Bal Habayis to a certain degree. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the power, kavyachol, over to Klal Yisrael when we acknowledge our powerlessness, and through the acknowledgement of powerlessness, we draw down the true power, which is Dani Hashem Elokeichem, which is Kavyachol HaKadosh Baruch Hu being mislabish within me by way of letting go of all of my fears and my concerns in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And at that point, it's Makayim the Oilam V'Noisen Shefa L'chol HaShleisha Oilamos. And at that point, the Yid themselves becomes almost like the Oilam HaAtzilus Kavyachol, as the Leshem Shema B'Chaloma says, that the Tachlis of the Welt is for the human being to be unified with their efforts and their own labor to see the the reward within the labor itself, which is the tachlis of that a person wants to be neheneh from their own schar. This is the darga where a person themselves becomes the illumination, and they're able to rectify the worlds of separation that they find themselves in. That's what happens where a person who has been truly, truly vulnerable has the ability to open up those layers of concealment, and it's nice and shefa l'cholash leisha ilamos, and the worlds of separation and the broken places and the shvirakite and the sheker of that person's personal experience is now elevated through that darga of Atzilus, where they become almost like a ma'on for the Or Ein Sof that's mislabish in the world of Atzilus in such a way that the effort itself is refined to become the schar, just like the kalim are refined to be the light itself. V'hainu dichsev. And this is what the pasuk means when it says, Soyar ta'asa l'teva, that you should create illumination within the teva, Noach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Noach, Kloimar, shetedaber diburei emes ha'me'irim. Soyer Tasila Teva, as the Heilige Magid says in the name of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and it's brought down in Amud Tefillah, that Soyer Tasila Teva means to enter into each and every letter, enter into each and every word, to illuminate the speech act with the vitality of consciousness and emotional consciousness and desire and infinitude, to draw it down in through the process of the Tzimtzumim, down through the constrictive process of thought into emotion, into speech itself, and through the articulation, which is a breakdown of a whole into the parts, because once I speak a word, it's not every other word now. Prior to speech, it was infinite. Speech itself is a tzimtzum, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the world through dibur. That if I'm zoiche to, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, and the Magid says, that you have to illuminate the word, you have to find olamus, neshamos, and elikus, you have to find godliness and infinitude and souls within each and every word. This is the path of the Baal Shem Tov. This is the path of the Oisios. This is the path of encountering HaKadosh Baruch Hu panim el panim through the Oisios themselves. And so what it means is Tzayar Tasa L'Teva, that you have to create illumination for yourself in the Teva. Zok to the Heilige Rebbe. Chlemer should tadaber diburei emes ha'me'irim. Your hispaitis, your diburim should be diburim shal emes. Diburim shal emes, true words that comport, that convey import, that they have something significant to say, that there's not a mabakach. They're direct and to the point. They're direct and to the point. They awaken within themselves a certain element that was concealed until that right word was delivered, and it broke that thing out of its concealment and it enabled a person to move a little bit forward. That's the diburim shel emes that a person has to draw down in the teva itself. And this is what Rashi was explaining. Yesh oimrim even toiv, v'yesh oimrim chalon. There are two opinions as to what the stone was, as to what the illumination of diburim shel emes is, of what saying a true and honest word about the self in moments of concealment, how it awakens me to break free. One Manda Amr said it was an even tov. Another Manda Amr said it was a chalon. As Rabbi Nachman is going to point out, this distinction is exactly what we just discussed. The Even Tov is when the person themselves becomes the source of illumination because they've tapped into such a vulnerability that they become almost kavyachol like the Choit Meshal HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world of Atzilus, and they become the implication that breaks free from all of the concealment. And then there's other times where the light does not emerge from within the individual themselves, but the anticipation of truth, or the coming closer to truth, or the circuitous route of coming to a place of powerlessness and full admission over what it is that needs fixing in this world. So even though I'm not fully there yet to become the source of illumination within myself, where I'm connected directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in this place, I'm receiving the light from outside like a chalon. So the Manda Amrim who talk about the Tzayar Ta'asila Teva, what is the source of the illumination that breaks a person free from the concealment of the self to reveal the openings that are always and ever present available. So the machlokas of Rashi is exactly what Rabbi Nachman just described. V'zeh amarnu, and this is what we said. Ki yesh shtei madrigos. There's two levels. Mishu b'madriga emes ha'amiti. Someone who has reached that level of purified consciousness and ego nullification to the point where there's no shame in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's only the desire to move towards tshuva. In that place, who meir ba'atzmo. In that place, a person doesn't need to necessarily receive instruction. Their confidence itself is a sign that they're capable of moving forward and breaking through to the other side and penetrating through the darkness and that concealment of that hellish darkness, and to climb through with new senses of openings. V'yesh oimrim, and there are others who say, meaning to say imre emes, yesh oimrim, meaning there are those who speak in a certain way, that the lashon of Rashi itself is megala, the cloud that Rabbeinu is being megala, that yesh oimrim over here, and it's also true wherever Rashi says Yesh Oimrim elsewhere, but over here it's being used as the example that Yesh Oimrim, meaning with words of MS that don't illuminate so much. They're the words that illuminate tremendously, where the person themselves is illuminated and they become the rectification. That's the Man Amr who says it's an Even Tov, Shemeir Me'atzmo. It's a gem that illuminates from within itself. But V'yesh Oimrim, there are others who also speak words of truth. They're also who others speak words of vulnerability and are capable of moving closer to the truth of their condition and the situation wherever they find themselves. No, but they're not operating on the level as high as the other level. Vehem chalon, and they're like a chalon. It's a window that receives light from outside. They can't illuminate their darkness. They still feel stuck within the trappings of those old conditions and those old helpless patterns of thought that enable these people are capable of receiving instruction from somebody else. They're at least now susceptible to receiving the light so that they can eventually get to the place of being the light themselves. Because someone else can come along and illuminate them like a window. That's the nature of friends. In the place of being an Even Tov, one is talking directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the place of a Chalon, one is talking to a friend. That's what perhaps Rabbeinu means when he says that a person has to learn how to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way that they talk to a friend. That a person who is on the level of a chalon, even though they're hisbodedus and they're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is fundamental and it's significant. Nevertheless, they need hisoris from others to help them come to terms with the fact that in fact they can break free from whatever is holding them down when they learn the secret of powerlessness and the revelation of the full power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol. And there are others who are capable of cultivating that inherent minei ubei relationship directly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Directly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. This might be connected to something that Ravitcha Meir Shlita was talking about today in terms of the Maisa Bereshis and the Maisa Merkava. Maisa Bereshis is the awakening within the self, where a person is almost like an Even Toiv. And then there's the Maisa Merkava, which is a Harchava, which is two separate things. That's already going to be like a Chalon, or vice versa, depending on the way that a person is looking at it. Nevertheless, let's go weiter in the words of Rabbeinu. When a person finds themselves on the level of a Chalon, so they're capable of being illuminated by another person. This is practically speaking the distinction between a window and a precious stone that causes illumination. The Even Tov, the stone, the precious stone, illuminates by way of itself. But a window doesn't illuminate through itself. It illuminates, but by receiving light from elsewhere. Another thing, like a luminary or the sun, that's what illuminates. That's the lower level of Imre Emes, where a person is not fundamentally vulnerable, but almost there. But they can still be receptive of suggestion at that point. V'hainu. And then this is what the rest of the pasuk says. So tzor ta'asel Teivah, depending on what type of dibor it's going to be, it's either going to be the illumination of the self or the possibility of being illuminated by those I receive insight from. And then the rest of the pasuk says va'el amma, and that there should be on top of it, because the dibor, what does it mean el amma? Why is this word amma over here? The dibor, speech, is referred to as an amma. Why is speech referred to as an amma? So that the pasuk makes sense in terms of describing the nature of the spiritual experience of speaking words of truth. Amma is Roshei Tevos. The process of amma, or the word amma, represents eish mayim. It represents fire and water. Fire and water are the paradoxical elements of expansion and concealment, or revelation and concealment, moving out like water and moving in like fire, drawing together like water or separating like fire. These two opposites in their unification, the Eish and the Mayim of Dibor, the tzimtzum and the expression fundamentally rooted in every act of speech, because when one chooses to say one word, they're by definition not choosing to say the other word. So it's always a balance of wanting to say every word, which is the mayim of speech. And then the eish of speech is the recognition that I have to be silent in choosing the next word that I'm going to speak. And then when choosing another word, it's a finer expression of mayim, and then pushing back. And so there's always an eish and a mayim inherent within the process of speech, the paradoxical expression of concealment and revelation, which is always at play in the process of speech. Shahadibor kalul, speech is composed and comprised of both of these elements. And the hey, and what is the hey doing there? The hey is the chamesha motzo sapeh. So you have eish and mayim, and then the hey represents the 5 gradations of the mouth, the 5 processes of articulation, which are the concealment of infinite energy to be expressed in language itself. So we see that the amma is the paradoxical relationship at the heart of language, which is expression and concealment, eish and mayim, and that concealment and that paradox being drawn down through the chamesha motzo sapeh, which is the hey. So you have amma, which is going to represent this concept of speech and vulnerable speech in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. the Hainu, which means to say the pasuk can be read as follows: Ve'el Amma, and when it comes to that which is above the Tzohar, shetadaber diburim asher tachlena melamala meloshan kalsa nafshi. That when a person wants to create a Pesach in the Teivah, when a person wants to find the place of comfort from within the storm, so they should open up their mouth and begin speaking, and their words should be like Eishin Mayim that comes down through the levels of the concealment and the tzimtzum of Dibor. And then the pasuk says tachlena melamala, it should be pushed in and built there from above. What's the lashon of tachlena? Kalsa nafshi, that there's an inherent desire and a yearning, endless desire that wants to go upwards. That needs to be inherent within the speech. That the words should ascend upwards and that they should be waiting for my words above. That they should be words of truth that illuminate. The azay, and at that point, the pesach hateva betzida tasim. Then there's going to be an opening in the heart of the teva, and I'm going to find a way through. V'tzida hu melashon sayed bepiv. What does it mean, these sides? What does it mean, the opportunity to break free? It's that secret of Tzayid Bepiv by Esav. Why was it that Yitzchak Avinu loved Esav so much? What did he see by the Gvuros? What did he see by the struggle? What did he see by concealment that Yitzchak loved? What was appetizing to Yitzchak from that place of the Tzayid Bepiv? Hainu hayitzahara v'hasitra achra. Right? We create an opening within the Sitra Achra by elevating ourselves and speaking a word of truth to break free from the concealment. We reveal the light within the tzida, the tzad, those things that surround me from the side, those inconsequential elements of meaningless transgressions in my life, is the tzayid befiv, and that's where I create the opening. That's the Yitzhahara and the Sitra Achra that the words and the Diburim of Emes are coming to illuminate to help me break free from my stuckness. By speaking words of vulnerability and honesty, a person is zoichet to create an opening within the Sitra Achra itself, to reveal an opening within hell itself, as the Ramchal writes in the Jewish Akivoy, and to get rid of all of the choshech and the darkness that is surrounding me on every level. Kolomar, meaning to say, that a person has to have a real intentionality when speaking their words of truth, that they want to create an opening from within the side, meaning the purpose of this elevation and this powerlessness and this growth outwards has to all be kolomar keneged sitra achra. It has to be against the sitra achra specifically. It has to always be for the sake of climbing out of concealment. Shenikra tzida, that's referred to as something that's on the side, like the thing that surrounds and conceals. Because in accordance with the intensification and the strength and the doubling down of the sitra achra, in accordance with the intensity of the problem, so too has to be the precision and the depth and the focus and the intentionality inherent within the process of vulnerable speech and hispoidedus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where I'm truly allowing my speech to become the vehicle that pulls me out of the stuckness that I find myself in. It's not saying things for those things to be heard. It's not saying things for those things to be understood. It's saying things so that the saying of those things is the very thing that pulls me out of the things that I'm saying. Zakta Heilige Rebbe, and he goes in, and I'm rushing through the Torah a little bit because I want to try and get to. I'm rushing through the Torah a lot a bit, and there's about 2 more pages, so we'll see how much more will go in this. But the Ikar says Rabbeinu. I'm sorry, that's not where we're at. We're holding by the Ikar Akavana, the main intention that a person should have. When they find themselves fully and fundamentally contained within concealment and they feel that they can't break free. And a person feels that they have no power to overcome the issue in front of them and they don't have the strength to move forward. And a person feels that they are completely surrounded and enclosed by all of the concealment that surrounds them on all sides. And we saw that sida is the secret of the Yetzer Hara. Rahman al-Itzlan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should protect us from this state of mind. And a person doesn't have any way of breaking free or climbing out of the darkness. The main point of action, the main suggestion is this: be honest with oneself, be honest with the circumstances, be honest with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, be honest, acknowledge the reality of the situation, face it barely, unflinchingly, be mitmoided with reality, because I'm not afraid of anything. And I run from you to you. I have to push myself and draw myself towards emes, and to truly look at the innermost point of significance at the heart of all things, and the truth of who I am, and the truth of what the world is, and the truth of what I need in my life. And a person should daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to only give them the emes ha'amisi, that secret of titin emes liyakov v'keneged zeh. And when it comes to drawing down the emes ha'amisi, the keser elyon olav nikra, the highest level that illuminates all darkness, keneged zeh, when it comes to this potent spiritual act, ein shum choshech v'sivav sheyashkech lo. Suddenly it's going to be revealed that there's nothing surrounding me and there's nothing darkening me. Ki ha'emes hu Hashem yisparach ba'atzmon, because when I draw myself closer to the truth and I face what I need to face and I'm present with what is present and I face the reality itself, which is the illumination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when I face HaKadosh Baruch Hu face to face, there's nothing to fear. And at that point, it's Hashem Oiri. Hashem is my light. V'keven Hashem Orli, and because Hashem is my light and He illuminates my path, ein shum choshech shiach. So there's nothing that darkens me. There's nothing that blocks me. B'vada yizke lirois hapsachim l'seis min hachoshech. And a person will certainly come to find the openings that help them climb out of the darkness. And the secret of the aspect of Pesach Devarecha Yair, that your words should illuminate mi bein apsayim v'havein hetiv. And a person must understand this. A person must understand this deeply. So we see that this is the avodah. The ikr, the main thing is shetfilaso b'chinaso bakashaso. All of the elements of yearning and desire and asking and searching. Afal pishi yafshar le'ledaber shem dibur b'tfila v'tachnun migoyde l'choshech v'abilbulum savi voisem ma'od mikol tzad. Even though the person feels completely incapable and that it's impossible for them to express any expression, but because the darkness and the confusion is surrounding them so deeply. Afal pk, nevertheless, al kol panim, even on the smallest level, yir ledaber dibur be'emes, say some point of honest truth. Be'ezah madrega wherever a person finds themselves, so whatever low level a person finds themselves. For example, what a person should say, Sheyomer Hashem hoishia be'emes. I should say Hashem hoishia. You should save me in truth. A person should say hoishana, hoishana, save me. Even though a person can't speak with the intensity deserving of that spiritual expression, nevertheless, they should act seriously when they say it. They should say it truthfully and authentically from where they are at, even in their inauthenticity. In accordance with what I am, and through saying a word of truth, suddenly I'll come suddenly to reveal the light and the openings that are within the darkness. And I'll come to escape concealment and illuminate the world and illuminate myself and find light, and I'll begin to be able to daven properly. To end, we're not going to read any more from Rabbeinu, but there's a conversation that Rabbi Nosson comes and asks Rabbi Nachman, and based on a chazal that talks about how the world was created like a hay. The world was created like a hay because there's an opening on the bottom that a person can fall out of, but there's also an opening on the top so that a person can climb back in. And that is the Pesach also, that wherever a person falls, they can also climb back in. But the Gemara says it's more difficult to climb back in because it takes a longer time to get up to that new Pesach. And Rabbi Nosson asks Rabbi Nachman, but is it possible? And the implication is that one can also come back by the way that they fell. They can go up through the bottom. They don't have to climb all the way up to the top. They can go with this act of finding a Kadosh Baruch Hu in this moment, and they don't have to become that tzaddik. They can find the tzidkus within the Baal Tshuva Avodah, and they can run directly to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even within the thickness of darkness, where I can't feel that I can climb myself out of the other side. And Rabbi Nosson says that even though Rabbi Nachman didn't agree fundamentally with what I said, the implication of his silence was that there was some deep matter to the inyan that couldn't yet be revealed. This Torah reveals so much. This Torah reveals what it means to open our mouths and allow our words to illuminate the world. And Be'ezras Hashem, what it's going to do is it's going to bring us to a place in Avodah. It's going to bring us to a place in Avodah where we're able to continue the process of growing together. Okay, Beseder, my friend. I have to go, but we will speak soon, okay?
All right, Shkoyach, Reb Shlomi. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Shakoyach.
Okay, bye.